If you don't want to be spoiled, hold off until after you've seen Spider-Man Brand New Day, because we're going to talk about all of it. Who Sadie Sink is playing, what happens in this movie, and what it sets up going forward this week on Beware of Spoilers. Good evening and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. It is July 30th. It is the release date of the last MCU movie before Doomsday, which they did not show the trailer of before this. We did get to see Jumanji, and I'm sure that the fan will be very happy about that. But, you know, we didn't see the Doomsday trailer. What we're here to talk about is Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is phenomenal. I went into this with, okay expectations. We've been talking about the MCU movies as a whole, and one of the things across all three Spider-Man movies that they've done is that Peter Parker doesn't feel self-sufficient. He feels forced to learn lessons by the circumstances around him. And while that's still to an extent true here, he does feel more autonomous. He feels more like a fully fleshed out character who is making his own decisions. The other thing is, all three movies have kind of a pretty weak first half. It's to a lesser extent in No Way Home. But both Far From Home and Homecoming have a very weak first half that's made up for by a very strong second half. This one is good all the way through. And I think what it is, the first half of the movie is Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And it's just, Spider-Man as an entity within New York City. And you feel that. It feels authentic. And it feels authentic to the area. And all of that is handled very well. The second half of the movie where we get into the big thing, where it's again, halfway point, we get the reveal, Jean Grey. That's who Sadie Sink is playing. And don't get mad at me about spoilers. The name of the podcast is Beware of Spoilers. I said in the intro, we're going to be spoiling this, so this is just where we are right now. We're going to be spoiling the hell out of this, because it's hard not to talk about this movie without taking into consideration the broader implications. I don't think that I've left an MCU movie, which, first of all, imagine telling someone back when the Avengers came out, okay, so, 14 years from now, when we have another movie coming out, we're going to be introducing Jean Grey into the MCU, played by an actress who's probably a toddler at this point, or, a young kid, but she's going to be playing Jean Grey, and it's being introduced in a Spider-Man solo movie that's also in continuity with this. It's incredible that we've gotten to this point, but I don't think there's another time in the MCU where they've as clearly telegraphed exactly where this is going, because this movie does such a good job of laying out all the groundwork the MCU needs for the mutants going forward that I'm very excited to see where the mutant saga goes. Because we talked about it a little bit on 30-Minute Reviews a few weeks back, or was it last week, when we talked about Homecoming, the idea that, damage control for the MCU has become their ICE allegory. We saw it in Wonder Man, which has now been canceled, effective today. We saw it, in Ms. Marvel. It's become this kind of paramilitary government agency who's rounding up people with powers to do experiments on. And it's interesting that that's this thing that formed out of Tony Stark. Tony Stark was the one who, as a billionaire, influenced the government to take control of this and do that. And it has spun into this oppressive force. And now we're getting to the point where he also, bankrolls, Spider-Man in the beginning, and he gets he has the Fabricator, which was created by Tony, and the fabricator created by Tony creates the inhibitor. And the thing that stands out to me is that there's this great scene where he's sitting in Punisher's, like, house, which is like a dock that's like abandoned, and it's like a boat in the dock that Punisher just lives in. And he's sitting there and he's looking through, what's it called? He's looking through, you know, he's working on the inhibitor, sitting, and right behind him on the wall is a panel that says Sentinel on it. And you can't tell me that's not foreshadowing. Like, it's so interesting that Tony Stark, unequivocally portrayed as a hero in the MCU, is going to end up being this genesis point for all the oppression of the mutants. Not directly. It's not like Tony Stark went out there and created the Sentinels, or went out there and created, you know, anything to do with that, or founded Essex or Trask or anything like that. But he created all the circumstances to cause this. As for the movie itself, let's talk about the movie itself. I love the dynamic between Tom and John Bernthal. The dynamic between the two of them is so good. It's the second time this month we've seen the two of them in a movie together. It's phenomenal. And I think it's just Tom Holland has great chemistry with anyone you put him on camera with. He's just really amicable. Like that's I guess the best word I would use to describe him. And he plays off of whoever he's sharing a scene with very well. He has the great back and forth with Punisher about, like, who saved who in Staten Island and whether or not it counted, and whether or not he should go to whether or not he should owe Spider-Man. That whole thing is so funny, and they both ask Zendaya at the same time, "What do you think?" And she's like, "I think I just want to go home." Like, the whole thing is just fantastic. And the idea that, you know, you have this great, I mean, it's his wife, like the scene where she confronts him about the letter that he wrote back at the end of No Way Home, is just phenomenal. Like she acts the hell out of that scene. The "I don't love you, but the girl that you wrote about here, I understand how she could," is just heartbreaking. And it's just like, and he sells it in such an understated way, where it's just like, he's just crushed, and it's starting to show just a little bit, but not all the way. And then she comes back and she goes, "Yeah, I don't have my phone, like, can you give me a ride?" Like, that whole thing is just phenomenal. And it's arguably my favorite time that I've seen Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. Like, the awakening of the Hulk here is such a great scene. And I think they released it online early as like a promo for it, where it's like no banner, no her, only Hulk. Like, God, it's just so good. But I really enjoy everything in this movie, and I think that this is a testament to Destin Daniel Cretton. And I think that what we're looking at here, he was supposed to do the Kang Dynasty. Like, he was originally, when they were doing the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, he was supposed to direct the Kang Dynasty. And this feels like they're like, okay, we're going to throw you a bone instead of doing that. We're going to let you do Spider-Man. And he gets this really big ensemble movie with a ton of moving parts. Like, Yelena's here. And the scene with Yelena, there are like two scenes with Yelena. They're both great. Like, him going to the bathhouse and meeting with her in her office, and she's just in the water, and she's like, "All right, you have to take the suit off." So he takes off the entire suit except for his boxers and the mask, and it's the funniest thing. And he's sitting there in this in the tub having this conversation with her, seriously, in just this mask. It's such a great scene. And I think the thing is too, it's like Florence Pugh, I think, has been, by and large, the strongest addition to the MCU post-Endgame. I don't think there's anyone else we can say I mean, in fairness, it's like no one else really had the longevity or has been used as frequently. It's like she's got more appearances than Hawkeye at this point, I feel like. But like the fact that we had her spread out so much was such a great decision. And we've gotten to know this character. And I think fundamentally, this is kind of the thing that has harmed the multiverse saga, is that we haven't had a chance to get to know these characters. Like, it's the idea of like these people that keep showing up again and again and again, and when that happens, we'll get to know them, and we'll get to, we'll feel like these characters are people we know. So we feel that with Yelena, because Yelena keeps showing up. Yelena shows up in Hawkeye. Yelena shows up in I mean, obviously Black Widow. Yelena's in Thunderbolts. Yelena's here. Like, there is no shortage of Florence Pugh in the MCU, and I'm here for it. I love Florence Pugh. She's fantastic. But it's just, that's why we don't have like that same love for like Shang-Chi. We don't have that same love for any of these other characters, because it's like they're one and done appearances. They're here, they move on. They're here, they move on. They're here, they move on. And it's just great. Moving on. And I think that's why this movie works as well as it does, is that it's like everyone here is someone you care about, and they all get the time. And also, Jean has a lot of time to really develop here. We get I would say, at least the second best developed Jean, if not the best developed Jean, because she's definitely better than they ever developed Sophie Turner. Which is not a knock on Sophie Turner. She only had a movie and like 3 scenes to develop herself before she became the Dark Phoenix, and that's not fair to her. And here, it's like we get this entire movie where it's just about who this character is and laying out her personality and doing all of that. I would not be shocked if Destin Daniel Cretton ends up doing something really big for the MCU going forward. When they do an inevitable Avengers 7, I would not be shocked to see him behind the wheel, because he did a fantastic job of managing all these people in this movie, and it really shows. Who was the other person I really wanted to shout out? I wanted to shout out the the director of photography, whose name I wrote down during the credits, because it's useful information in this. The director of photography was Brett Powlock, and the reason why I wanted to shout him out is not specifically for just doing a good job in general, but there's a great sequence in the fight at Damage Control, in the fight between Spider-Man and the Hand, which is the one we've seen in the trailers and all of that. It is so well shot. It is a fantastic action sequence, using the acrobatics. And it's not just this. It's like the fight scenes, with the Hulk. It's the same thing. It's using the acrobatics and the nimbleness of Spider-Man against these other targets. And it's really well done. I think the movie's not without its faults. I do feel that Peter Parker is a little underdeveloped, and the idea that he's going to be that he needs to learn to let people in and just accept both sides of himself, I that's an interesting development, and that's an interesting way to take it. I just feel that we have this thing where it's like he's affirmatively saying, I'm gonna let people in and I'm gonna hang out with Ned and MJ once, but as Spider-Man, when we get to that moment where it's like, where Jean asks him, are you Peter Parker or are you Spider-Man? And he says, I'm both. There was nothing really in that, unless it's just and maybe it's not communicated well enough. Maybe he just had that moment where he's sitting with Ned, and they're playing with Legos, and they're both quoting Lord of the Rings back and forth to each other, and it's just, they just fall back into old habits, and that longing for that is an interesting, development. I just feel like there was a what's the word I'm looking for here? A weird missed opportunity to make that a little bit better. The other thing that I was a little bit surprised by is that when we see the fight where he's fighting Scorpion possessed by Jean, and he's fighting him, and he's going nuts with the spider DNA taking over, and he's getting he's getting more powerful. It's interesting that they went with the spider DNA, as the thing there. And I understand why. Because if you go with the obvious, and I'm sure everyone listening knows what I'm going to say, it should have been the symbiote. If you go with the symbiote, you don't get the symmetry of the story between Peter and Jean, where it's about embracing that part, and he has to embrace that part, and that whole struggle is very cleanly stated by Banner. Who are you to decide what the good and the bad parts of nature are? When he's like, you can't just accept, that. And it is a little undercut when it's like he's managing the Hulk, and I feel like there's a little bit missing between, like, Professor Hulk and the merged Banner and the merged Banner and Hulk, to him dampening it. Like, I feel like there was something missing there, and it would have been nice to have what that is. But it is what it is. There's also a reference to Cindy Moon in this movie. I don't know if anything's going to come of that, but the student who asked him a question, his name is Cindy, and I immediately was like, oh, Cindy Moon, we're getting that? And I'm like, probably not. It's probably going to be like the Miles reference in Homecoming, where you get that scene with Donald Glover, and he's like, yeah, I got a nephew out here. I want to make sure he's safe. Like that, it's probably gonna be more like that, where it's like, yeah, this is a woman. She's Asian. Her name is Cindy, and that's gonna be the beginning and end of the similarities. And it's just like, you'll catch it if you know Spider-Man, but you won't. It's not gonna develop into anything. The other thing, CGI can get a little spotty at times. The CGI, especially in the sequence after Peter goes to the party at Ned and MJ's house or apartment, when he goes there and he sees MJ with the new boyfriend, and he just fucking crashes out and starts swinging through the city, like suicidally swinging through the city. That CGI looks awful. And I will say, too, it is also pretty bad in the sequence where he's bringing MJ back home. And she's like, hey, do you want to come up and talk to Ned? But the CGI of the two of them swinging does not look great. And you would think at this point, we've been doing Spider-Man for, 20 years now? 25 years almost, in live action, in big movies. You'd think we would have gotten this down to a science at this point, but no, we still don't. I will say it does look better than a fake plastic Spider-Man that she's pretending to cling on to. But I digress. What else do I want to say about this? Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that this is where this movie is, that this is where the MCU is going. It's very clear that this incident at the end of this movie is going to be a catalyzing event in a way that there aren't many other big catalyzing events like that. This is a seismic moment, like the Battle of New York, or Tony fighting fighting Ironmonger, or any of these, like, Civil War, where it's this big thing that you really can't get around, and it's going to fundamentally reshape the universe, to the point that I was kind of shocked that there's only one post-credit at the very end, and it's setting up more, I think it's more setting up Secret Wars than it is setting up Doomsday, but with Spider-Man being off-world, and which is one of those things where it's like, this would be less impactful if we didn't just have a movie of Spider-Man off-world. But that's, the idea that, like, he is, that we didn't have a post-credit scene of, okay, so, as we can see, the incident that happened in New York happened because of someone we're calling a mutant. Like, that kind of press conference as kind of a dark symmetry to Iron Man would have been really interesting. Where you get that moment at the end where it's like, clearly and I think that was my other big narrative complaint, is that they end the damage control story a little too neatly for what this is. The idea that, like, why is the NYPD heading up the investigation into, what's his name? I forgot his name. Metzger, that's his name. Why is the NYPD leading the investigation into this? Like, And also, why is he on the run if he's the director of the Department of Damage Control? Like, the whole thing feels very strange that they kind of clean that up so neatly, which is a little unfortunate. I feel like we need to have more of the collapse of damage control into other things, especially considering it has turned into kind of this monolithic entity with Wonder Man and Miss Marvel. And I realized that, like, that's the thing, too, is that it's like, as I was watching this, I was kind of like, if you consider Marvel Television as in continuity with this makes very little sense. There's no reason how this lines up with what we've seen in Marvel Television. Like, the journey we see Spider-Man go through over the course of the 4 years and become this beloved hero does not gel with a city that would elect Wilson Fisk as mayor. And that's the thing, too, is that it's like the Punisher, as we see him, feels kind of divorced from the Punisher we saw in One Last Kill. You kind of got to separate the two, which I think is kind of, the right move, because it does create, like, there is no, like, oh, you got to watch Daredevil to understand who Punisher is. And he just shows up, and immediately there's a great dynamic with him and Spider-Man, where there's this understood thing. These two know each other, and they work together. This is the most fleshed out and comic book-like that the street-level MCU has felt ever. And that's kind of why it works so well, is that you feel the world feels lived in a way that most other movies feel like you're showing up to the events of a movie. This feels like you're popping into something that's already in progress. And this is just a day in the life of that, and that's why it works so well. I can't wait to see more of the X-Men in the MCU. The reveal of Jean, Sadie Sink playing Jean, is great. I'm not shocked. I don't think anyone was shocked. There were the telltale signs, like the leaks and all of that, and then also, like, if you look at Sadie Sink, you're like, oh, that's clearly Jean Grey. Like, that woman was born to play Jean Grey. Like, she's there. And then we saw the set picture of her dressed exactly like Jean Grey, and then, the guy on the red carpet said, I can't wait for everyone to see Jean. And it's just, like, it's not shocking, but still, that moment where it's like, yeah, she's Jean, like, her name is Jean Grey. It's like, oh, fuck, here we go. Good for Destin Daniel Cretton. I'm very happy this movie turned out as well as it did. And I'm very excited to see what he gets next. I do feel that he is someone who is going to stay within the Marvel system. And I feel like this could be his Civil War, in so much as this is the movie that's going to take him above and beyond, where Shang-Chi is him coming in and doing the Winter Soldier. And I'm not saying Shang-Chi is as good as the Winter Soldier. I have to rewatch that too. But he's doing this contained story with some loose threads that connect back to the rest of the MCU. But by and large, it's its own self-contained thing. And then he goes on, and now he's doing this, which is, it's Spider-Man, but it's fundamentally so much bigger than that. And we already know that, I want to say Jake Schreier is his name, who directed Thunderbolts. He's the one who's doing, what's it called? He's doing X-Men. We know that already. We just don't know when that movie's coming out. But goddamn, like, I would be very interested to see if the MCU ever actually grapples with the direct impact that Tony Stark has on these events. Because I feel like there's it's not even a tenuous thread between Tony and what we're gonna get in with the X-Men. Because, that's right, I didn't finish the thought on the catalyzing event. The idea that, like, this mutant was there and took over 1 square kilometer in every direction around Roosevelt Island, which for those of you who don't know where Roosevelt Island is, because they're not from the New York area, it's an island that exists between Manhattan and Queens. Like, there's a cable car that you take between to get there, and it's people live there on Roosevelt Island, and there's also a large park. It's very nice. But Roosevelt Island is there. So 1 square kilometer in every direction around that is a huge amount of people in New York City that would have fallen under that. And that's a lot. And I'm surprised, like, this is an incident that is so big and so widespread that the issue is, like, because Metzger got out alive and Metzger is able to tell his side of the story, that's the thing that makes me be like, okay, well, like, everything that happens in the third act of this movie, Spider-Man should be a fugitive from the feds. Like, he broke into a federal facility, helped facilitate the escape of a highly dangerous person, and it's like the only reason that the ending is as clean as it is, where he's talking to, what's her name, Detective DeWolf. He's talking to her as, and she's like, oh, good, well, he's on the run, but we'll find him. Like, no. Like, you mean to tell me that when all this happens, they're just going to take the word of Spider-Man? They're not going to take the word of, like, Spider-Man who was shot by Punisher in the middle of this? Like, the whole thing is just kind of a little bit like, okay, I don't believe that people would buy this. And especially considering that, like, this is only a few years after, like, he was acquitted, or, like, the charges were dropped after being accused of killing Mysterio and causing the attack. Like, the events of what happened there are not out of people's mind. Like, the entire, like, that's the thing, is that, like, the movie is so fundamentally ingrained in No Way Home, where you need to understand that, like, yeah, the events of No Way Home happen, and he makes the wish that everyone will forget who Peter Parker is, and that is a funding thing of this movie, where without that, this movie doesn't work, because you need to have him completely withdrawn, because May is dead, and his friends don't remember who he is. But at the same time, if he doesn't, you have to question, what was the reason why he made that wish? And the wish was not to forget about Mysterio's message. Like, the wish was for everyone to forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. I'm sorry, not wish, it was a spell. Wish implies different type of magic. That would be stupid. But yeah, it's interesting that, like, you have to argue the semantics of the spell to get the, what's it called, to get to that point. But I think we'll wrap up there for today. It's a 5 out of 5. Go see this movie. It is phenomenal, and I feel confident in the MCU for the first time in a very long time. And we'll be back probably tomorrow morning with voicemails for Isabel. And until then, have a great rest of your